Riches in the Hitches, an RV park investment podcast, takes you behind the scenes of the RV park industry where park owners, investors, and other industry professionals share their unique journeys, challenges, and triumphs. From transforming raw land into a thriving campground to navigating the ups and downs of managing guests, this podcast uncovers the untold stories of the people who make RV life possible and the strategies behind building a successful investment. Whether you're a park owner seeking insights, an aspiring investor exploring opportunities in outdoor hospitality, an RVer curious about life on the other side of the check-in desk, or just someone who loves hearing entrepreneurial stories, we are excited for you to join us as we find riches in the hitches.
Welcome, guests, to Riches in the Hitches, an RV investment podcast. Today we have Matt Whitermore. Thanks, Matt, for joining us today. Just give us a quick introduction of yourself and your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Robert. Super excited to chat here and love what you guys are building. So happy to connect. So I'm based in upstate New York. I have managed to, over the last 3.5 almost years, purchase 3 campground RV parks.
Yeah.
2 in New York, 1 in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Came in from a commercial real estate finance background, commercial mortgages, acquisitions, all different types of commercial real estate. So I think I bring an interesting perspective, probably a good case study of all the mistakes not to avoid and all, the mindset to not start out with. And I think I've overcome some of those things and love the business, and always happy to share what I've learned over a few years here.
Well, thanks, Matt, for joining us. We're going to dig into a lot of that. There's some real meat in there we can go to. We're going to start with our Riches and Hitches quick connect lightning round in the very beginning. So I'm going to ask you some quick questions, just basically the first word that pops to your mind, quick answer, and then we'll roll back into some in-depth detail. All right.
Love it.
So you have 3 parks. Where did you find them? Pick any of them. Where did you find them?
First one, cold email.
Okay.
Second one, cold call. Third one, through a broker.
Oh, the cold climate.
Yeah. Yes.
Nice. Okay. What are the features of your park? What amenities do you have?
First one, none. It's a true wild country, outdoorsmen and outdoors women's park. No septic, no sewer, no amenities, just beautiful fly fishing creek in the mountains. Second one, similar setting, but more the basic amenities, swimming pool, store, arcade. Third one is kind of a premium family seasonal campground.
Okay.
New amenities, new, more higher end stuff, rec hall, brand new swimming pools, brand new playground, all that stuff. So full spectrum.
You're bridging, that is a pretty right gap, like total rustic campground to RV resort. That's pretty awesome. All right. Here's a little more in-depth question. How did you finance them? Debt, equity, syndication, fund? Just give us the cap structure.
A lot going on here. So they were all syndicated on the equity side.
Okay.
The first one, seller financed 70%.
Nice.
The second one was purchased all cash.
Okay.
And then 6 months later, refinanced with a life insurance company.
Okay.
And then the third one was financed 68% on the acquisition with that same life insurance company.
Okay. Awesome. Great. So you 506B or C, or what was your syndication structure?
All accredited investors.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Let's love to just dig in a little bit more about your story. You mentioned you coming from a commercial mortgage background. Just tell us love to just hear your journey. How do you end up from that to being a park owner of 3 parks?
Great question. So I'm approaching 34 years old. Got into real estate at 20 years old. I got my license. I was living in Boston at the time, going to college. I became an apartment rental agent and did that for a couple of seasons. Started meeting landlords and getting acquainted with the idea of being a landlord one day and being a real estate investor, and just fell in love with that idea, became obsessed with it. So one of the landlords, property managers, more of a company that I came across, they were hiring for somebody to do research and data entry in the world of foreclosure auctions. This is back in 2011,
right,
when foreclosure auctions were just I mean, across Greater Boston, there was 15 auctions a day. So my whole job was managing a calendar and schedule of foreclosure auctions, researching the properties, and setting up the owner of the company to run red lights all over Greater Boston, trying to get to a dozen foreclosure auctions in a day. And they were buying multiple properties a day. I did
Yeah.
that for a few years. I mean, it was insanity. The
Yeah.
volume, awesome crash course and
Sounds like
everything.
an adrenaline rush too.
Oh, it was crazy. I worked 7 days a week, 80 hours a week for like 4 years straight. No joke. Um, got exposed to more of the capital markets side of the business
Right.
and became a financial analyst. Wanted to learn about debt and equity and all that. So I spent some years doing commercial mortgages and equity placement, and then started getting the itch to invest myself. Felt like I had learned enough and started buying small apartment buildings with a partner in upstate New York. Got up to 32 units,
Yeah.
and then stumbled into the campground business by way of looking at mobile home parks.
Okay.
I flipped one 12-unit mobile home park, and I scraped mobilehomeparkstore.com
Okay.
in different sources, and a small percentage of them were actually seasonal campgrounds. So this is 2019 and into 2020, and realized I had some bad data when campground owners started getting back to me saying, Matt, this is not a mobile home park, it's a seasonal campground. But if that interests you, come check us out because we're thinking about selling. So I said, why the heck not? I've always been that kind of guy. Like,
Yeah.
oh, cool. Let's check that out. So I drove all over upstate New York and New England where I was prospecting, looked at campgrounds of all different shapes and sizes and quality and
Yeah.
location, and just fell in love with the idea of, I've always loved the outdoors, hiking, just being outside, breathing fresh air, getting away from the hustle and bustle of work and the city and all that. So it just really resonated with me to think about, oh, maybe
Yeah.
one day I could own a portfolio of these things and travel around to different beautiful locations across the country. And,
Yeah.
it's a totally different, I don't know the word, but I found being an apartment landlord to a lot
Hmm.
of times kind of be a thankless job. A lot of,
Hmm.
especially in the Northeast and New York, you're viewed as an adversary or the enemy of the
Right.
tenant. And we work hard to provide good, clean, safe housing and all that, but it was mindset and like temperament shift of like 99% of people that show up to a campground are thrilled to be there. They want to
Yes.
hear all about your story. They want to, it's just a totally different ball game. So stumbled into that a year later. That cold email came back, and I raced down in 3 feet of snow in February in the Catskill Mountains. Looked at this campground, put an offer on it. Probably paid too much because they accepted it right off the bat, and did due diligence for like 8 months. Tried to figure out what I was doing. Closed on the deal and promptly moved into a campsite and stood behind the
Okay.
cash register. And now 3 years later, I'm learning a little bit more every day.
Don't you hate that when your first offer gets accepted?
Yeah, like,
It's
oh, offer too much.
it's like the worst feeling ever, you know? You're like, oh crap. Oh yeah. I learned that lesson as the seller many times. So
Yeah,
I accepted a couple offers, like I got the offer and I'm like, when we were back selling, we were very similar to you. Um, I flipped houses, bought apartment complexes, bought mobile home. So over the last, 5, 6 years, we've sold a lot of apartment
nice.
communities and mobile home communities. And, you know, there was a time period where we're getting offers. And I was like, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll sell it for that. And I learned my lesson a couple times because I took the first offer and didn't make any changes. And I've never had a deal close that has happened. So now, regardless of whether I like the price or not, I'm going to respond with some type of counter offer, even on the
Right.
terms. So,
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah. Let's talk about Matt. I'd love to learn. I'm very curious, right? Because the parks that we own and operate are all primarily southeast. They're mostly long term. Every park we have is open all year. What you do is significantly different, right? And in the your geography, the weather conditions you got to deal with. And correct me if I'm wrong. Are you still parks still seasonal, or are you converting them to annual?
They're still seasonal. We have plans in the makings to open up year-round use with cabins and things that we can winterize better, but that'll be a long road. We got to redevelop infrastructure. We have above ground water lines in a lot of the parks, and it's I think it'll be worth it, but it's a long road, quite an endeavor.
That's like a whole different ballgame, right? And I think that's the fascinating part about being in the RV investment industry or ownership. Just even as a customer, like every park is so different. It's so much fun, but like effectively what you're doing compared to most of our portfolio is an entirely different business. So maybe I'm just curious, like what are some of the challenges you face with running seasonal park? How do you underwrite them? Like what are, I'm sure this time of year maybe you've already done it, you're worried about winterization and blizzards and stuff. Like just I don't know what I'm asking, but I just want to understand what's the difference between running a New England northern seasonal park versus what I get to do down here in Florida.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it didn't keep me up at night sometimes of did we empty that tank? Did we blow out those lines? Because I've had it happen where you go to fire things up in the spring, and I've had it where a cast iron well pump is completely split in half because the contractor didn't open the valve. He blew out the lines, but didn't open the valve on the other end, so it just blew all the water to the other end of the system. So, it's learn some lessons through some mistakes. Honestly, it's what I talk to a lot of investors and aspiring, acquirers of campgrounds and RV parks, and a lot of them get scared of northern states in the Northeast.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
It creates an interesting business model in that there so many of these campsites are full season rental. We call them seasonals, but that doesn't refer to the seasonality. It refers to the RV site being rented for a full season. We have customers that have been in the same campsite for 40 years, and it becomes their weekend getaway during the season. They winterize their RV, store it in winter, and then come back in the spring and open it back up.
Okay, so what you're saying is you have someone who rents the spot for the whole year.
Correct. Well, typically it's May 1st to October 31st, and then there's a winter storage provision.
Okay.
And from a business and finance standpoint, that really attracted me, especially when I was looking at some of these larger parks that were 80 to 90 to 100% full season renters. You collect a deposit, usually the middle of the preceding season. So it's August, and you say, all right, campers, time to re-up for next year.
Okay.
So if you have a few hundred sites, that might be a $500 or $800 deposit. Like that's a nice chunk of change. That you're getting in the middle of the season, and then typically you have an off-season payment plan to get it all paid up before opening day. So, I was looking at these books and looking at the timing of the cash flows, and it was coming from multifamily where like you're trying to squeeze blood out of a stone in terms of CapEx budgeting and improvements and all that. It was like I could get a few $100,000 throughout the off season when I'm closed, and I can budget for new Wi-Fi or whatever. Like I can budget for all these things. It was kind of a budgeter's dream to look at that. I mean, there's also some downsides to it for sure. Like your revenue ceiling is a lot lower on a seasonal site versus a transient. So it's give and take. I'd call seasonal RVing as like it's a high floor, low ceiling type of RV business. So.
Yeah, so just for our listeners, because the terminology seasonal does throw people off, but for most of the industry, seasonal means that they are renting for an entire season, right? And in your case, that is from May to
October,
May to October, right?
Yeah,
so
6 months,
one guest in one site the entire time that you're open, and then you said something really interesting. So you're storing their RV for them. You're making some revenue off of that?
Yeah, it's usually something we implement because I mean we do have to staff it to some degree in the winter. I mean we're shut down for the most part, but security is a bit of a concern. We ask the manager to go walk the park and make sure nobody's, squatting or, hunting on site or whatever. So, we charge a few $100s for the entire 6-month off season, which is a nice little revenue boost when it historically with mom and pop owners is not something that's charged for.
Where do you find that most of your guests are coming from? They're coming from, like how far away and what cities?
So in the we have 2 parks in the Catskills, and it's 90% plus New York City metro residents. The one we have in central Massachusetts, pretty heavy Boston area concentration, not quite that 90%, but we find that people are willing to travel 3 hours, maybe 4 hours for a seasonal. Personally, I'd probably want to travel no more than 2.5 hours, but we have some pretty remote, special, unique locations that I think people are willing to travel a little bit further for.
Yeah. So this is basically someone's weekend getaway during the summer. They live in the city. Are they I mean, do you find that, most people are coming like Friday to Sunday, or are they there all week, or, what's the daily flow?
The overwhelming majority is the weekend, which it's I lived on site for some time, and you have Wednesdays throughout the season that it's just like there's literally nobody at the campground, which is like, I love that because I love being alone in the woods, but it can get a little lonely, if you're there for a whole season. It's really interesting. It's I'd call it like a low traffic, low kind of wear and tear business.
Okay.
We have plenty of seasonals that honestly might not even show up once the whole season.
Really?
And you're at a price point where we're kind of at like the 4,000 plus $4,000 to $5,000 rate for
year.
the season, which is it's not a tiny amount of money, but to somebody with some disposable income, that's like comparable to a storage rate. So we have people that they get older and older, and they've been at the campground for 40 years, and it's like a sentimental thing that they don't want to come get rid of the site, and they don't come up, but they write the check as soon as you send them the bill, and then it becomes like a dance of like, your trailer's 30 years old, it doesn't look so great, like, can we move it to the back of the campground where it's not like, we had a guy that literally had a canned ham 40-year-old camper right in the first site as you drive into the campground. And now it's a beautiful A-frame cabin that makes, is on track to do like 40 grand on the year.
Nice.
Versus a seasonal that when we bought it was doing $1,600. So
so it's it's very interesting. So when you go now out and you're looking for the next deal, like I think the question I want to ask is, how do you underwrite something like this? Where are you looking for comps? What are your revenue assumptions? Like, how do you, when you're going to a seasonal park, is it the location that's really critical? Is it the past performance? Like, what rings your bell when you look at a park and you say, yep, I'm buying that one?
The underwriting is pretty simple, back of the napkin wise. I mean, we look at operating them at a 50% margin. We feel like that's pretty predictable. So, NOI margin of 50%. We take the seasonal rate.
Okay.
I mean, it's different if there's heavy transient component. You got to analyze your ADRs and your occupancy and all that. But if it's, say, 80% plus seasonal, the way we look at it is take your seasonal rate, multiply it across all the sites. That's your gross revenue. Ignore revenue, firewood, ice. I don't find that stuff to be very predictable. So take your site revenue, multiply it by your number of sites, cut it in half. For your NOI margin, multiply it by 10 for a 10 cap, and that's pretty much where you want to be. You want to take into account major deferred maintenance or major CapEx items and work that into your offer price, because you can get in trouble, especially in the Northeast with these parks that were built in the 60s. You might have a ticking time bomb of millions of dollars of reconstructing all of the infrastructure, which you got to be careful. Really got to be careful.
So do you, How do you think about vacancy on a seasonal site? Do you factor in any vacancy, or just it's
We do. I mean, probably 5 to 10%, but honestly, like we save that for later
okay?
in kind of the due diligence process. Maybe that's a mistake, but the way we look at it is if there are viable if there's transient demand, we
Hmm.
look at it that we could go 100% seasonal or we could go 80% seasonal. And if those
Right,
20% are viable transient sites, we should make at least what we're making seasonally with the
right.
transient revenue because it's if you take $4,000 on a 6 month season,
Yeah,
it's a really low ADR. So
right.
and a pretty low occupancy. So you don't need to be hitting it out of the park on a transient site to make your 4 grand. It'll
Yeah,
it'll cost you more to earn that 4 grand because you got to check in and check out and clean the
right.
site and weed whack and do all that stuff. But
Yeah,
that we're comfortable with that approach for seasonal campgrounds in the Northeast, I'd say.
yeah, that's good. That's good, Matt. Thanks for kind of sharing that. So
Sure.
basically, seasonal rate, 10 cap, 50% margin,
Exactly.
get you in the ballpark pretty
Yeah.
quick. Yeah,
And it's if I've learned one thing, it's like go bigger because it's a lot of hard work to run a small campground to run a big
yeah,
campground. And we've the first one was 850,000, the second one was 2 million, the third
okay.
one was 4.5 million,
Hard to
and
stress.
now it's like I feel like $1 million in revenue is kind of the mark of where it starts to like get exciting,
Okay,
or an awesome development opportunity, which is what we're getting into with the small one I bought. We always knew it was only $150,000 in gross revenue.
yeah,
It was always going to be like a covered land play, multi-phased development project, and it's taken me 3 years to
right.
figure out like what to do with it and like find the right team. But I feel like we just kind of finally launched our process, picked our concept, and now
Okay,
we're looking at a $8 million
build out.
recap and development into a what we're calling an outdoor hotel or a landscape hotel
Okay,
with cabins on wheels, some glamping, but it's a beautiful, unique, wild site that really lends itself to a different use. And like I said, we launched an A-frame cabin. It's a Zook cabin park model.
mm-hmm.
Their A-frame
Yep.
unit. It's been doing $250 ADR, 80, almost 90% occupied in the first
Wow.
season. No marketing. Like I said, on track to do $40,000, which is huge at a campground that was only doing 150,000. That's
Yeah,
30% of the revenue.
off one
Uh,
unit.
so if we can do 10 of those, we can triple or quadruple our campground revenue. And if we can do 30, then
Yeah,
we're 10xing or 15xing our gross revenue. It'll be a hell of a project and an investment, but
yeah, for
uh,
sure.
it'll be fun.
So that cabin, it's bringing in 40,000 a year in gross revenue. What was the cost of that cabin?
Sticker price 130 grand. You may or may not have to pay taxes based on state laws and lodging. Sometimes you can get out of paying the sales tax.
Right.
And then probably another 25,000 to like
Yeah, 150-ish into it.
yeah, right, yeah, furnishing and skirting it, building a
Yep.
deck, getting some nicer outdoor furniture, fixing up the campsite a little bit. So it's more than I'd like to spend with our development. We're focusing on much smaller cabins.
Hmm.
It's a 400 square foot. It looks like a New York City apartment inside. It's
Yeah.
got a full size bathroom, full size bedroom with a king bed. Like I would live in it if I was single, honestly. Um, but it's still too much.
Right.
I mean, they're all over the place and they're doing great, but for what we want, it's overkill. We're gonna go for smaller cabins, really invest in the exterior campsite because
Hmm.
people go there to be outside in wilderness and on the creek and in the mountains. and observing wildlife and whatever.
Yeah.
They're not going in there to watch TV on a couch or whatever. Some
Well,
of
you
them
hope
might
not.
be, but yeah.
You hope
So
not.
that's our philosophy, is try to do a cabin for $65,000 and still get that mid $200 ADR, 50% occupancy year round, and the numbers really jump if you can achieve that. We're gonna have to rebuild. It's gonna be like $800,000 in soft costs, and rebuilding all the infrastructure. It's gonna be a 3 to 4 year,
Okay.
3-4 phase development project.
That really, it's a good segue, because I was going to ask this, and I want to make sure this is not a political question, but you're in the States, you're in New York and Massachusetts, for a lot of the country. That sounds like a really scary place to
Yeah.
develop or build or operate. You mentioned some of the headaches you faced as a landlord on the multifamily side. Um, how do you get what are your thoughts on that? Are you how do you get around, you're afraid that you're going to face a lot of development challenges just from a approval process? Because, again, from a guy from Florida, that sounds like a scary endeavor to try to build a
100%.
resort in.
You're not wrong. I mean, there's quite a few hurdles. I like to view that as sort of a moat,
Okay.
and that if you can do it, you're separating yourself, and it's a two-sided coin of, and I'm conditioned. I'm from the Northeast. I've only invested in the Northeast. I look at Texas, where campgrounds and RV parks are popping up everywhere, and
Yeah.
that scares me, because it's like, oh, I spent millions of dollars on this RV park, and then my neighbor's going to build one. So it's everything you're saying is valid, but
It's a great point.
yeah. So we're lucky to have built a network, and I've engaged an owner's rep, project manager, who a gentleman named Sam Morton of Soma Build Inc. I would say he's honestly one of the top guys in the world at developing this type of property. He was running developments at Getaway, now Postcard Cabins, recently acquired by Marriott. He's done it in the Catskills. He's done it in the Northeast. He's done it other places in New York. So yeah, I mean, we've got our work cut out for us, but I'm confident that we have the team and the knowledge to do it. We are forecasting it over 3 to 4 years.
Right.
It's valid. And I came from the multifamily world, and I kind of viewed getting into the campground business in a way, sort of getting out of New York and getting away from that climate, because it's a big gray area. But as we see it, we're not a landlord.
Right.
We probably will end up in housing court at some time or another, because you're subject to the political climate and everything. And if a disgruntled seasonal says, "Oh, I've been living here for 2 years," chances are the state of New York is going to look at them like a tenant.
Yep.
But that doesn't happen often, and I think to some degree we can rest on the fact that when we are closed in the winter, it's not a habitable residence. Right. It's like, we're not approved. It's not a healthy or safe place to live in the winter. We're not approved for that. Or our water systems and septic systems are designed for campgrounds, not residences. So it opens up a can of worms to some degree when we say, "Oh, great, now we operate year round." Open ourselves up to maybe some trouble. And I think we have the tools and the team to mitigate. You got to have a good lawyer. You got to have good documents and good processes, and you can mitigate a lot of that. But just be prepared for what can happen.
I mean, I think the point here is pretty clear. And I get the same question from a lot of people who are getting ready to buy a campground. They're in Texas and they're looking at something in New England, or they're New England looking at something in Texas. I'm like, I think one of the best pieces of advice you can give someone is just buy and operate in the area that like that you live in, that you're close to. Geographically, you're not that far from where your house is to your parks. Massachusetts one's a little bit farther away, but like, you're operating in the environment that I think it's my advice, I guess, is to stay and do your first couple of deals in what you know and operate in. And I don't know, what would be what would be your best tip that you would give to someone who's getting to buy their first park?
Such a good question, and you made a really good point there. And you I don't claim to be all smart or have the secrets.
You sound pretty smart.
I appreciate that. For me, I'm a very like hands-on person. It needs to be in front of me. And
Yeah.
I live the closest park to me is 2 hours and 15 minutes away, but I am constantly taking day trips or overnight trips, popping in unannounced. That's just a hospitality business thing in general of,
Right.
It's really hard to manage it fully remotely. There's groups that do it very well, and that's why I say I don't claim to be that smart, because to me that seems like a really hard thing to do that I'm not sure I could really ever implement or wrap my head or hands around. I grew up not too far from the one in Massachusetts. It's 4 hours away from my house now. My parents still live there. My sister still lives there. I have some comfort in that.
Right.
If there was a crazy emergency, I could call up my parents or my sister and say, "Can you run over?" Whatever. Like, I can go stay with them for a week if there's a big problem and I need to be on site. So yeah, I mean, other than that, the biggest lesson for me, I came in with the attitude of like hotshot real estate finance guy, like, oh, I found the deal, I negotiated it, I raised the money, I'm gonna build a huge portfolio of these.
Yeah.
My manager quit right like 3 days before closing. So I went from living in Albany, New York, to living in a tiny home on wheels in Site 17 with my wife, standing behind the cash register, doing the honey wagon runs myself. So like, and I'm lucky in that I totally looked at it as a real estate investment and absolutely got flipped on my head day one.
Okay.
Lived there for 6 months, worked like a dog, and it turned out that I loved it.
Yeah.
There was an alternate universe where I gave up and went home and said this wasn't for me. But I really enjoyed it. It was such a nice change of pace from being buried in spreadsheets. And like I said, I love
Right.
the outdoors. So that's one lesson. And then very closely related to that is it's such a people business. And like I've read a few times now, Unreasonable Hospitality by William Gadara.
Yeah.
And what resonates with me that I've learned, and then he put a nice bow on it through his words of like, it's such a people business, and that you succeed by first prioritizing your team,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not going to have happy customers if you don't have a happy team that's dedicated and showing up to work to show an awesome guest experience.
Yep.
And then, like I think a lot of real estate investor types come into this, and if they're raising money, they prioritize, and as they should to some degree, what's best for my investor.
Right.
You have that fiduciary duty, but I think a mindset shift is required of you're actually prioritizing your investors and your investment and your business by first prioritizing your staff and
Mm-hmm.
inspiring them and teaching them to prioritize the guest experience.
Right.
And if you do that, everything else should fall into place. Obviously, you got to follow a budget and keep things in check and all that, but I think there's a mindset shift that's required for a lot of people that come from real estate into this space. It's all about the guest experience. Show people a fun time, document it with photos, circulate the photos through your marketing, promote the next round of events, and bam, you've got an awesome occupancy percentage. You're starting to bump up that ADR. Your park's full. People are calling. You got your waiting list. All this, pretty simple mission, and then everything else will fall into place if you follow that as your North Star.
I love how you gave this a long thing and then said, "Oh, it's pretty simple, pretty simple mission," because it's not, right? I think that's like, we manage like 16 parks, and we take the same approach, and it's like you have to make the team the priority, and it's not easy, and we don't we don't always do it well because it's so easy to get focused on the guest or focused on the investment itself, and you have to hit the returns. Yeah, got it. But I think you nailed it. Like the idea that you're coming into the RV park investment or ownership industry, and that you treat it like in a mobile home community or apartment complex community. See it all the time, right? The big guys come in, they buy something, and they get crushed, right? Because
Right.
they have no idea that yes, it's RV parks are pretty interesting because yes, it's commercial real estate. It's an
Yep.
investment. There's cap rates, there's occupancies. You kind of underrate it the same way, but the operations are just totally different. Like and the positive side, like you mentioned, is that you get to go enjoy your property. One of the
Yeah.
fun things that we love to do is just go RVing, and we stay at our property. And again, make the joke. The kids think we're on vacation. I'm at work, and
Yeah.
it makes us both happy.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Yeah,
I've got a
it's
2-year-old myself almost, and
okay.
you can't get him out of the creek. It's like the most fun things. We go down to the campground. He jumps in the creek. He's picking up, whatever, lizards
Rocks.
and bugs, and just having a blast. And it's like paradise to him.
Yeah, you didn't do that with your 36 apartments?
No. Nope.
No. Yeah. So there's a lot of upside there too, but it is not a passive investment. Like you can be a passive investor and invest with you, and or some other ways. But if you're an owner, there's no passive part of this.
No, not at all.
So you have 3 parks right now, right?
Correct.
So how's it been going from 1 to 2 to 3, and then where do you see the future going here?
So really, really good question. I probably ask myself that every day. I mentioned the development project. I mean,
Yep.
that's going to be a huge undertaking. Luckily, I've got a team that I don't really have to like figure out how to wear all the hats of a real estate development. I've got somebody who's done it, a few dozen times. So I'm fortunate for that. I can kind of play supervisor and
Yep.
kind of really, really just have the owner role there. I think development in this space is a tremendous opportunity.
Okay.
I see these small campgrounds that most investors would just pass up, that it's not enough revenue, it's not enough scale, it's
Yep.
not worth the brain damage. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to turn those into something different.
Okay.
Maybe it's still partially a campground, but glamping or landscape hotel, and it doesn't need to be super high end to make good money. I mean, I look at campground deals. I've put out offers here and there, but I would say I've kind of taken my foot off the gas to some degree on the acquisitions front, because I'm looking at this development project, and that's a lot of capital to deploy.
Yep.
At least compared to what I've done in my career so far. I think it's a really interesting time for everybody in the industry. There's only so many 200 site campgrounds, and that's what everybody's going after. And there's a new player every day, whether it's a hedge fund or private equity or real estate operator that's jumping in. And I read on like Twitter, on LinkedIn, commentary about the general commercial real estate market, and I've always found it to be an interesting kind of juxtaposition of being in the camping space. And people say, oh, there's no financing, the commercial real estate market is grinded to a halt or whatever. And then I see all this crazy stuff happening in the campground market that just does not at all parallel the commercial real estate market. And I think that's because of there's new players jumping in every day, and there's only 1,000 of those or 2,000 of those like investment grade RV parks existing today in the country, and that's a pretty small pond to swim in with some really serious players swimming around in it. So yeah, I think if I had to predict it, I would say a focus on development.
Okay.
Is what's in store for me.
Awesome.
But that could change tomorrow. So
it sounds like a smart strategy of, yes, you're doing development and expanding, but you're not, doesn't sound like you're focusing on like, greenfield up. You're taking an existing park that's probably shortcutting a lot of entitlement, a lot of zoning approval stuff. You have some infrastructure in there. Is that kind of the philosophy?
Yeah, it's a great point you bring up. I think there's a lot of opportunity to remain within the existing campground use.
Yeah.
We see that with getaways and postcard cabins and auto camp. Those are all legally RVs.
Right.
But you never step foot onto those properties and say I'm in an RV park.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about brand and feel and experience.
Yep.
And I think, there's a lot of words of wisdom out there about don't combine those concepts. There's a couple groups that have done it really well of having camping with traditional RVing, with high-end glamping, with high-end cabins. I think it's very challenging to do that, but I think with the right location and with the right brand, like there's a place in North Carolina called Romestead. I don't know if you've ever come across them.
I haven't.
Something to check out if anybody out there is looking at combining concepts. I think they've done a really good job of, providing a case study for that, where they've got really awesome cabins mixed with primitive tent camping, with RVing, with glamping tents and yurts, the full spectrum of the outdoor hospitality, market of offerings exists on their property, and it's a tasteful brand. And I don't think it I think that's the challenge, is like you have a $400 a night cabin next to a $50 a night tent site. You're probably not literally next to each other, but I think the concern is alienating customers, or making people feel uncomfortable. But I think there's ways to, navigate that and execute it. So it's an experimental kind of time. I don't think any of us truly know what's in store.
No.
Makes it a little scary, makes it a little exciting, but fun nonetheless.
I totally agree. Like it's like the Wild West, right? We kind of just make it work, make things work. It can be very frustrating to people who want, I would say, repeatability. Like if you think you're gonna do a template and say I'm gonna do it this way on every deal in every location with every guest, just doesn't work.
100%.
It is scalable. It certainly is scalable. And
right.
I think you touched on it. The scalability comes from the team, the processes, the hospitality component of that. But the structures, the layout, like that's not scalable. Like just every property is different.
100%. I preach that every RV park or campground is truly a unique business model in and of itself.
Right. You're not putting a 3-story Holiday Inn and just finding your 3-acre parcel and just saying, here's my template, and putting it over and over. So that's fun. I think it's fun, but certainly can be frustrating to people who don't have that mindset. Don't go after it that way. Cool. Awesome, Matt. Let's wrap it up. I'm going to ask 3 questions, and we'll set off to the next episode. But man, this has been an amazing podcast interview. Loved it. Learned a ton.
Likewise.
So thank you. So, all right, here we go. So, in our brand Unhitched, one of our models is disconnect to reconnect, right? So what is it that you do to disconnect from the things you're trying to eliminate and reconnect to the things that are most important to you?
Really awesome question. I think partially it's involved in my business of, I'll go down to the park and find a nice piece of woods and just get some fresh air and not really go down there to work. I've got a almost 2-year-old at home. I'm fortunate to work from home. It's a really awesome thing that, being a dad, I just get to go take a break for 20 minutes and go wrestle with my kid on the floor or whatever. And just a nice reset, reminds me why I'm doing this. And, I'm also a big walker. I like to hike. Just a nice, silent, quiet walk. No podcast, no music, just you and your thoughts. Been getting into cold plunge as well. So, yeah.
You don't even have to pay for it in your turn. Just go outside, jump in the creek. Okay. You may have just answered it, but we'll get you out of bed in the morning. What's your big why?
I'd say it's my son, my wife. My wife has been incredibly supportive as I've tried to find my way in this entrepreneurial journey, and feel like I owe it to her forever to make it pay off and make her sacrifices not a waste. And got this adorable little boy that want to give him a good life and show him what it means to work hard and have good values. And I think I lucked into it. I think I'm in a really awesome career path to have kids. And it's get away from the modern way of life that I don't love so much. We're in such a digital world that like go climb a tree and fall out and like break your arm and learn a lesson. Kind of taking it back to generations earlier. I think there's a lot of value in that.
I love that answer. I couldn't agree more. My boys we bought these little remote control airplanes for Christmas, and
nice.
They actually fly quite well, and we have really tall trees around our house. And so I spent my entire Christmas day and then the next day constantly trying to get airplanes unstuck out of trees.
Yeah.
Turns out the only way to do that is for them to climb up there. These are like 40 or 50 trees.
Oh, man.
But hey, they gotta learn, they gotta go, they gotta explore. I'm sitting
100%.
We're trying to catch this kid, but great answer. Thank you. All right, let's wrap it up with how can people connect with you? How can they get in person? What parks do you have? Just how can people reach out and learn more about Matt?
I'm super active on Twitter, now X. I still call it Twitter, but posting about my business there for a few years. I post a lot on LinkedIn.
What are those handles?
So it's at I Buy RV Parks on Twitter. I'm surprised that one was available when I went for it, honestly. And then just my name, Matt Whitermore, on LinkedIn. Come check us out in the Catskills, Covered Bridge Campsite in Livingston Manor, New York. Also Willow-Weemock Campgrounds right down the road, same town, Livingston Manor, New York. And then Lamb City Campground in Phillipston, Massachusetts, north of Worcester, Massachusetts, about an hour and 10 minutes outside of Boston. So yeah, come check us out, reach out. Happy to always talk shop and share my few years of learnings here.
Thanks, Matt. We'll post all those links in the show notes and get those for you guys to be able to click on easy. Matt, big thank you. Thank you for being on this. Thank you for sharing your expertise. We wish you a happy new year, very productive 2025, and continue to make riches in the hitches.
Yeah, appreciate it, Robert, and congratulations on all the growth and new exciting ventures.
Thank you.